Hi, everybody. Welcome to Winsight Live. I'm Jon Springer of Winsight Grocery Business here in New York. I'm here, as always, with my talented colleagues, Kat Martin in Chicago, Jenn Strailey in Denver, Brett Dworsky in Chicago, and as always, the supermarket guru, Phil Lempert. Phil, let's begin real quick. The list of retailers that have overridden state and local mandates to require their customers to wear masks is continuing to grow, including most recently Winn-Dixie, Southeastern Grocers, which late yesterday, after getting the tar beaten out of them in press reports that were picked up by, among others, the Washington Post, have said that they would require their shoppers to wear masks beginning on the 27th of this month. You know, Winn-Dixie was among a group of retailers, and really all retailers, I think, would prefer that their localities do this, because I think there's a real concern that's underlying this that kind of gets overlooked in the social media rush to kind of bash these companies for these policies, that they don't want to put their employees in a position to enforce a rule that might not be lawful in the places that they're trying to enforce it. So it's a tricky thing, and it's very emblematic of how the country has really sort of dealt with all the compromises it's had to make around this crisis, Bill.
So, John, you're right. But, the reality is for Winn-Dixie, 2 weeks ago, people were calling for them to change their name because of the Dixie part, being politically correct. But this mask thing was unbelievable to me when I looked at social media. How people were reacting, both positive and negative. There were people that said, good for Winn-Dixie, I want my rights. Then there were people that said, I will never go into a Winn-Dixie again as a result of it. And, I just think that these retailers need to be cognizant of what, certainly, as you point out, what the city and states are doing, but also of their customers. I really believe had Winn-Dixie proceeded with no face masks, they would have lost a lot of business as well.
It's possible, and like I said, they got picked up. They were proactively uh, cooperating with a number of different retailers, including the CEOs of Lidl and Dollar Tree, among others, that sent a letter off to CNN that was published and signed by a number of retail CEOs that said they kind of took the position that we strongly encourage all our shoppers to use masks, but we also strongly encourage the localities in which our stores are located do something about this so that we can. And so, they've been put in a tough position. Your point that, social media and the speed at which people can react to things, and the temperature of the consumer, which is, sometimes hard to read it at first, is really driving so much of the craziness in this country. It's not helping us overcome this crisis. And boy, we've got a long way to go still.
Yeah, talking about crises, the 2020 Dietary Guidelines, the advisory committee published yesterday the guidelines. So I just want to share a couple things. First of all, it's a new record, 835 pages long. That's what it is. Hopefully one of these days I'm going to read it. Here's the top line. It recommends eating more of these foods. Higher intake of vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, lower non-fat dairy, lean meat and poultry, seafood, nuts, and unsaturated vegetable oils. Less of red and processed meats, sugar-sweetened foods and beverages, and refined grains. Here's something that everybody should be concerned about, especially during COVID. It tightened up the restrictions on alcoholic beverages from 2 drinks a day for men to 1 drink. The regulation was 2 for men, 1 for women. Now we're equal. It tightened up restrictions on added sugars from 10% of calories to 6% of calories. And again, no mention of salt, of sodium. I don't understand with all the science that's out there. Also, a really cool story. Not to take away Jenn's thunder on good news, but on waste, Converse in Japan has decided that they are going to work with Food Textile, and what they're now doing is they're dyeing Chuck Taylor All-Star High Collection using waste food scraps. They give the shoes natural coloring, including juniper and purple cabbage. Some more bad news about COVID-19. One poll did a survey from for Nutrisystem. They found that these long days in lockdown may have been a wake-up call for respondents. 64% say they feel an increased desire to eat healthier. That's good. 63% say they've now placed more of a priority on improving their diet. More good news. But 76% of respondents shared they've gained up to 16 pounds. So we care more about health, but we're gaining 16 pounds. And last, I think, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this as well. I think we've gotten carried away. I don't know if you've seen the petition against Trader Joe's to rename all their foods. You know, what they've done is they've had fun with their labeling. So for Chinese food, instead of Trader Joe, it could be a Chinese name. Same thing with Italian foods and so on. We're ruining our food business. We are taking the emotion, the fun. I mean, I like to go into Trader Joe's and see all those packages and buy them, and it's fun. It's enjoyable. You know, we're just going to be a nation of, you know, Kraft macaroni and cheese. I mean, how boring is that? You know, so next it's going to be like Annie's Homegrown because it has a rabbit on it. You know, somebody's going to come against that. Aren't we getting a little absurd? Kat, what do you think?
Well, I just always remember in college when we would talk about these social issues and things, and there's always this pendulum swing. You know, they talked about that where you always want the pendulum to kind of like just be swinging in the middle, but then you get these forces and it forces it one way and that completely forces it the other way. So I think we're right now on this really high uptick of this pendulum swing. So hopefully all, you know, cooler heads will prevail and, you know, give us a little while and we'll kind of settle back down to where things are, you know, more back into rational thought and people's emotions have calmed down a little bit.
Jen, how's your emotion on this?
You know, these are such sensitive times. I mean, you know, I'm sure Trader Joe's was approaching that from a fun, you know, innocent way, but you know, people are sensitive right now and are getting offended, and so I suppose, you know, we need to be mindful of that too.
But I think that, you know, if I look at their frozen pizza, and I forgot exactly the name, Tony will put up a picture of it if he hasn't already. But you know, I think it's called like Uncle Giuseppe's Pizza. I grew up in an Italian neighborhood in New Jersey. That was not offensive to anybody in the Italian neighborhood. In fact, in a way, they almost were proud, you know, of heritage. Brett, you know, are we seeing that in convenience stores too?
I haven't heard of anything like this happening in the C-store space. But yeah, to echo what Jen was saying, that we're living in an incredibly sensitive time right now, and you know, a time where it's really important to step in someone else's shoes and see things from their point of view. So whatever, obviously there's a lot of heat coming down on brands in all industries right now, and I think it's all about what they can do to keep their consumers happy and to save their brands. So yeah, it's all about just looking at it.
So John, am I standing alone on this one, or are you with me too?
Yeah, you know, I'm sort of with Kat. You know, the pendulum is swinging. You know, my question is, you know, how far is it going to swing at this point before it comes back? You know, Jen's right. Also, you know, people are very on edge right now in the country. I think that there's an element of this. I think that people feel certainly powerless in some ways. You know, a lot of things have gone on that they don't agree with, and this can be on one extreme with the masks, and on another extreme, you know, with Aunt Jemima, and you know, in between. And you know, listen, the brands are sort of targets, I think, to a certain degree. They're big, they're perceived as successful, they're perceived as established, they're perceived as out there. And you know, if you're unsuccessful in, you know, affecting electoral change or whatever where it is you live, maybe you've got to take it out on some of the other established things that are a little bit more vulnerable. Now, I'm not discounting anybody's legitimate concerns about things that offend them. And listen, brands and businesses and people all need to think, like Brett said, about how other people perceive things today. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, but also there's a price to all this. So we know that the supply chain is broken. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with Secretary Vilsack, who pointed out, what the pandemic really showed is how broken it is and how much money we're going to have to invest in this. Now we have all these companies that have to invest in redoing their packaging or getting rid of brands. I mean, we consumers are going to have to pay for all this, and again, I stand alone on this, but Uncle Giuseppe's pizza is a pizza that I would buy. In fact, Dave Foreman is writing on our Facebook page. He goes to Cracker Barrel occasionally for breakfast. Political correctness has run amok. I agree with you, Dave. Okay, let's get to some stories. Jen, what's going on with UFCW, and how has Elizabeth Warren gotten involved?
Yeah, so on Friday, the UFCW held a national press conference with Senators Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown. And they're really, they say that they're going to stay on this topic of getting a reinstatement of hazard pay as well as a mask mandate. They wrote a letter on Wednesday to 15 of the top grocery chains, including Ahold Delhaize, Aldi, Whole Foods, Wegmans, Walmart, Trader Joe's, asking them to reinstate hazard pay. And Elizabeth Warren said, these people didn't sign up for a job where they were risking their lives every day, but that's exactly what's happening. Is the cases are just soaring in 40 states across the country. And she said, she wants more than just a pay bump. She said a pay bump isn't going to keep you alive if you get COVID-19. In the next stimulus package, she is urging the government to implement an essential workers bill of rights that would provide them with a whole suite of health benefits and protections in this pandemic.
And Brett, something similar is going on in the C-store side of things, right?
Yes. So earlier this month, U.S. reps from Louisiana and Texas introduced the new Get America Back to Work Act, which is a bipartisan bill that, if passed, would essentially provide liability protections to businesses that took precautionary measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in their stores. So essentially, if I'm a store owner and someone walks into my store, leaves, catches COVID-19, I cannot be held liable for that. And it's big in the C-store space right now because NACS, the National Association of Convenience Stores, they expressed their support for the legislation. Kevin Smart, who is the CEO of a chain in Texas called Quick Check, and he's also the treasurer for NACS, he actually spoke before the U.S. Judiciary Committee requesting liability protections for essential businesses, and convenience stores are one of those essential businesses. So lots happening here in the C-store space on a similar note.
So Brett,
and also, sorry, Phil, I was just going to say, I know National Grocers Association is pushing this as well, because, as in this convenience store space, in the independent grocer space, it would just take one lawsuit and these businesses would be wiped out. So I know NDA is really standing behind the legislation as well.
Well, is the legislation for customers that come in the stores only, or does it cover the employees as well? If I'm working in a store, I get COVID-19, can I sue the retailer, or this covers that as well?
Yeah, it's customers and employees. The operators of the store cannot be held liable. So even if I work there and then I catch COVID, I cannot pin it on the store.
So John, Jen mentioned Aldi. You just had a great conversation with Jason Hart, the CEO of Aldi. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the occasion was the opening of their 2000th store, which they didn't specify, but passed at some point in the recent days or weeks. And with that, I reached out to the company and was able to get a kind of a written Q&A with Jason Hart, their CEO. You know, this guy's been hugely influential, not just for Aldi, but for the entire industry, taken the hard discount, you know, concept, which at one time had a terrible reputation, and you know, as a company that would, you know, kind of for poor people to shop and not attractive, and completely changed the you know, the shadow it casts, and grew it to you know, 2,000 stores now, headed to 2,500, which would make them the third largest by store count, including you know, their first stores in Arizona, which has been they acknowledged they were looking at 3 years ago. There've been some delays, you know, kind of reported over the time, which all these never really commented on, but you hear local reports, the store's here, it's going to open soon. Actually, it's not, you know. All these very careful about saying what it wants to say and not saying what it doesn't want to say. So you can't really put it down as a delay, but they're finally coming. At least 4 stores this year in Greater Phoenix. We know as many as 17 are in the works, and a distribution center that'll set up a local headquarters there. You know, Jason, in his remarks to me, kind of talked about the phenomenon of changing shopping patterns that have happened as a result of COVID. You know, one of the areas where Aldi might look vulnerable here is that people are shopping around less. Aldi tends to be a smaller stores, visited kind of in addition to other stores. So maybe you're just going to Kroger now and doing all your basket and not going to Aldi. And you know, he acknowledged that traffic is down, which isn't a surprise, but noted that the basket is higher. And one of the ways that Aldi has changed is they've really, out of a very small number of SKUs, made it so that you really can buy a week's worth of groceries there, which is you know, another credit to his leadership. He talked a little bit about how his employees have responded. You know, he's very proud of that. And finally, the recession that we're either in or headed into soon. Historically, that's a great time for Aldi. Aldi's been pushing a message that their prices are low. They started that weeks ago. I think they're strongly anticipating that. And you know, last time when the recession hit 2008, 2009, these guys saw ridiculous growth. And you know, it can be assumed that that'll happen again.
So, John, two points I'd like to share. One is the other thing that Aldi's done over the past 12, 18 months is they actually doubled the size of their produce department and brought in a lot of organics. The other comment is about Phoenix. You know, it's always been one of these markets that have dumbfounded me, how competitive Phoenix is. Also, Lidl had plans to open up a bunch of stores in Phoenix, and they pulled out. They decided not to do it. Do you think that Aldi, in opening up in you know, Arizona and Phoenix, and making, you know, this a branch office and distribution center and so on, is really going to change the dynamics of that market?
They've been successful everywhere they've gone so far, right? And you know, you got to think about, like, the discounters do well when there's an established status quo to disrupt. So Phoenix is a good market for that. There's not a real strong discount presence there. You know, there's a lot of you've got Kroger, you've got Albertsons, you've got a lot of Walmarts there. I mean, that's, to me, that's prime ground for them. And you know, as long as the population is growing, which I believe it is in Phoenix, the economy's doing okay, or was. You know, this is the kind of market they do well in. They do well in almost everywhere they go.
Yeah, and I wonder, you know, when it comes to some independents like Bash's' and so on, how it's going to really affect them. I don't think it'll probably affect Walmart too much, or probably even Kroger, but some of the smaller chains might really get hurt by Aldi. And I think we've done this before, but who among our panel, you know, are loyal Aldi shoppers? I mean, I am. Anybody? That's it?
I mean, I'd like to go more often than I do. My local Aldi is a little bit too far away for us to get to. Like the store.
I love their extra virgin imported olive oil. I think it's one of the best olive oil. It comes from this little place in Sicily. And to your point, John, about SKUs, what Hart has done, you know, they have 4 olive oils. versus the average store, average supermarket that probably has 100. So they've got a general purpose olive oil, they've got an extra virgin, they have an organic olive oil, and they have this one that I was just describing that's imported and more expensive. And you know something? That's all I need. I don't need more than 4 olive oils to go through.
In many cases, they come out of the same box too. You know, they're all 3 in the same, and it's all about the legendary efficiency. And
Yep.
You're right. They've got their finger on the pulse of what people want, and they get it to them. They can only get them so much, but they've done a very good job at figuring out what it is to stock.
So, John, you've got an interesting take, and I'd love for everybody to weigh in on this, on what Walmart Canada is doing and how that could affect Walmart US. Tell us about it.
Walmart Canada just yesterday announced that they would devote $3.5 billion in Canadian dollars, which I figured out on the exchange rate was about $2.6 billion in US, to modernize their stores and their supply chain there. You know, Walmart is a little bit different in Canada than it is in the US in that they didn't grow so much organically. They bought kind of a beat up department store chain called Woolco. They've been slower with the, you know, supercenter rollouts, and Canadian grocers have been pretty good about kind of keeping up with them. The price gaps aren't quite as wide or whatever. But the interesting thing is that one of the analysts pointed out was that, you know, this is the kind of thing that you could see in the US if you did that you know, investment on a store per store basis would be something like $35 billion in the US. This is over 5 years, but substantial, right? So it can happen in Canada. They're going to do micro fulfillment in stores. They're going to go into electronic shelf tags. They're going to build 2 new distribution centers, which are going to have all kinds of robotics and efficiencies. So it sounds like, you know, 400 stores, 1 country, pretty alone there. It sounds like a nice little experiment of like, let's completely, you know, modernize an entire country and see how it goes.
Was there any mention as it relates to health, whether it's healthier products, whether it's putting in more clinics, any of that? Because Loblaws, when you look in Canada, has really owned at this point health. I think they're up to like 75 retail dietitians. They're really pushing it, and just wondering if Walmart sees that as an opportunity as well.
Well, I don't want to say they don't, but the announcement that they made was really more about the sort of infrastructure and less about the marketing and merchandising inside. Obviously, Walmart's got big ambitions in health here in the U.S. They've opened a couple of clinics. They're you know, doing all kinds of things there. But you're right, Loblaw is, you know, look, they anticipated Walmart's arrival in Canada by opening these real Canadian superstore units, and they bought the largest drugstore chain in the country, and, you know, all these things that were pretty forward-looking to kind of compete in a world that was going to be dominated by fewer and fewer retailers.
So, Jen, give us some good news.
Yes. So Publix and Produce for Kids recently kicked off their annual campaign with their 12 produce partners to support 31 Feeding America food banks in the Publix area. And this is actually Produce for Kids is entering their 19th year with Publix on this campaign, and has raised over $3.3 million for families in need.
That's great. Fabulous news. Once again, Publix, they do the right thing time and time again. So thank you all for joining us today. Again, Winsight Grocery Business, CSP, Supermarket Guru, our archives of all of our episodes are right there. And Thursday we'll be back at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific for more of Winsight Live.